cultivators, today we are back talking all about New Year's resolutions and how we can make those more successful, according to Chinese medicine. If you do find my content helpful, please make sure to subscribe and like this video. It helps me to continue putting out more Chinese medicine information. Have you made your New Year's resolutions for the coming year yet? Have you ever wondered why by February 1st, 50% of people have already given up on their New Year's resolutions? Today I'm going to share with you the secret as to why most resolutions fail and how we can make them more successful. So we know that we make these New Year's resolutions to create new habits, get a fresh start, and even recreate ourselves. But let's look at why we even use January 1st as the marking of the new year and what other dates, cultures, and civilizations dictated their New Year's to be and why. So we know that here in the Western world that we use the Gregorian calendar, which we can thank ancient Rome for. January 1st was dedicated to represent the Roman god Janus, which is said to be having two faces, one looking into the past and the other looking into the future. It also makes a little bit of sense of why they chose January 1st, because January just after the winter solstice, which means we're having more and more daylight hours returning. Now we know astrologically, most people use the spring equinox actually as the marking of a new year. This is when the sun enters Aries and is often about March 21st every year. Ancient Egyptian, the Phoenicians, and Persian cultures actually use the autumn equinox as their marking towards the new beginning or new year. And this usually happens in September, and we also know that Judaism celebrates their new year, depending on how it falls, the 7th month, which is usually end of September or beginning of October. Now, for Chinese medicine, the Chinese use the lunar solar calendar, or what is considered the farmer's almanac or agricultural calendar, which is today really just used by the more rural populations, and also that is the calendar that they use to calculate all of their festivals. You know, in more modern times, the Chinese were really forced to adapt the Gregorian calendar for day-to-day life. So they kind of use both. It just depends on what it is for. So Chinese New Year, or the Spring Festival, which is actually 15 days long, it's not just one day, usually starts on the second new moon after the winter solstice. However, for the Qi nodes, or the farmer's almanac that's used in Chinese medicine, the year is actually divided into 24 mini seasons. The first, which is Li Chun, or spring begins, which marks the beginning of increasing yang qi, or what is considered a growing, expanding energy, compared to winter's yin energy, which is demonstrated as more of death and decline, retreating, retracting, condensing, that inward movement of going in and dying, really. So we can really see that it's a matter of perspective and when we want to mark the beginning or new year. And because in Chinese medicine there's an understanding that there's really no beginning and no ending, that this is just a constant cycle that is going. It's kind of the paradox of the chicken or the egg, which came first. And to the ancient Chinese, the idea of what came first was really irrelevant. However, for the purpose of making New Year's resolutions and getting a fresh new start or getting new habits established and sticking, we want to ask ourselves, is January 1st actually the date that we should be using to implement these? Now, if we look at what Chinese medicine or Daoism or even just the Qi nodes, we can actually observe that really January 1st is not a great date to begin new things. Because January 1st is in the Qi node of the winter solstice, we can easily understand that because January 1st is actually in the Qi node of winter solstice, which the winter solstice actually marks the peak of yin, the strongest point of death, decline. You know, does this even sound, just to common knowledge, like a good time to get started on new projects, new habits during the peak of death and little movement? I would say no, simply because the qi, or the energy of the environment of nature, and we have to remember that we are also part of nature. And so if the energy of the universe is not supporting change or movement or growth, we are really still surviving and living off of the qi of the previous summer, that by now, since this is the very end of winter in Chinese medicine, there should be very little left. Just like in olden times when you had to store your food for the winter. By the time you're at the end of winter, you're really trying to make any food that's left stretch, and there's not much left. So you can understand there's really hardly any energy, and anything that you use now is really very precious. So the next thing we want to ask ourselves is, when will the energy or the jia qi start supporting the implementation of new habits or resolutions? We might consider Li Chun, or spring begins, as a more appropriate time to actually commence our New Year's resolution, because the energy is naturally favorable and lending itself to the concept or theme of changing and growing and starting over. With this natural inclination towards change, it's the same idea of how any seeds literally planted during this time will begin to sprout and then become established, and as the year progresses, become stronger and even flourish by the end of summer. And in the same way, our habits now should reflect this. Since we are part of nature, we want to observe nature, because this gives us a good idea of how we should also be conducting ourselves. And this is what I talk about in all of my seasonal conduct videos, so make sure you are subscribed and getting those if you haven't already. I will link them. So when we observe what's happening in nature, we can actually arrange our lives by mirror or mimicking internally what is happening externally. This allows everything to flow in unison and harmony, and everything is able to proceed along with less effort needed to establish these new habits or resolutions. When we try to start something in the peak of death and decay, it is less likely that the habits will have the type of momentum going that is really needed to maintain them long term, simply because there's just very little energy that is available to them. It's simply the idea, is it easier to ride your bike uphill or downhill? So my takeaway from today's video is, if you want to establish any New Year's resolutions or new habits this year, make sure instead of using January 1st as your start date, you actually postpone them and don't begin them until February 4th. The universal energies will be much more inclined to support your changes. I want to wish everybody good luck on their new habits and goals for the year, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.